Hey everybody, it's me, Angela Walters. Welcome to this week's live chat. I know it's been a couple weeks since I've been here. In fact, right before I went live, I was like, what buttons do I push? I don't even remember what I'm doing. But I'm excited to be here. Sorry to have missed you the last couple weeks. 2 weeks ago, I was off on a little girls quilting trip. And then last week, I was doing a longarm boot camp class. But I did a quick little live, so hopefully you were able to see that. But I'm glad to be back as normal in my studio talking about my favorite thing, quilting, and kind of recapping some previous videos in our Arcs, Curves, and Points Free Motion Challenge Quilting Along video series. Now, if you're watching live, as always, Jessica is behind the monitor, monitoring the chat, writing down your questions. So be sure to leave those in the comments, and I'll try to answer them at the end. And if you're not watching live, no worries. You can still leave those comments under the video, and I get on there from time to time and answer them. This week's live chat, we're actually going to recap or kind of go over the last two video tutorials that just came out about machine quilting with rulers. And in these recaps, I kind of go over what we learned in the video and maybe point out things I didn't maybe say in the video, and then of course answer your questions as usual. So excited to go through that. Now, if you don't know what I'm talking about, be sure to check out my YouTube channel, because this video series, we're kind of right in the middle of it, and it's all about quilting with rulers, and I'm having a whole bunch of fun. I hope everybody is as well. So like I said, that video series started 2 weeks ago, and through those 4 videos, we're learning a bunch of different ways to use those arcs, curves, and pointy rulers on our quilts, and kind of having fun learning some different designs. Now, before we get into the video stuff, just an update about rulers. The amount of interest and the amount of orders for this video series was like overwhelming, you guys. I can't tell you how much I appreciate it. And Creative Grids has been working their little behinds off making the rulers. So as soon as they come in, we send them out, and we got a little bit of a shipment the other day, and more are coming in. It's like my whole world for a dot ruler. So if you haven't got your order yet, I just thank you for your patience. As soon as the rulers come in, we send them right out. And even though the videos have started, these videos are up, indefinitely. So once you do get them, you can definitely participate. And even in the type chat before I went live, we were kind of talking like, oh, I haven't got my rulers. I'm excited to go. Even after the videos are over, you can always join in these live chats and ask questions about this one or any of the previous videos, or really anything free motion quilting related. So I love these live chats just kind of as a way to stay connected. I love getting to talk about quilting, but also as a way for you to, ask questions about previous videos. So please, please, please don't hesitate to join these live chats and ask questions. And again, thank you for your patience with those rulers. It's been interesting. We know our mail delivery people very well. We're like, oh, do you have rulers? Do you have rulers? So it's been fun. Anyway, so let's go over the last 2 videos. Now, this whole challenge, this whole video series is about machine quilting with rulers. But beyond that, it's all about repetition. And if you've kind of been quilting along with it, you've probably already seen that. We're not just learning how to use these rulers to make 2 designs. We're learning how to use them in a lot of different directions to make different designs on our quilt. So unlike some video series where we kind of, sometimes I'll do, oh, this video is about swirls and this one's about pebbles. They're all about these rulers. They're just different ways of using them. So hopefully, if you are quilting along with me, you're enjoying that repetition and getting that practice in. So on the custom challenge panel I designed for the video series, each week we're focusing on a different part of the panel. So the first one starts in the center, and this week we learned a lot of different things with that video, and I'm hoping, as I was putting them together, I'm like, I hope this isn't too much. People always say in my live chats, we like the longer videos. Well, we're about to find out, because those videos are like 20 minutes long, and that's still cutting out some stuff. But throughout that video, we saw a bunch of different stuff in the center of the panel, and we kind of started with motifs. Now, motifs are just a set design, and we used our curve ruler to create that kind of beautiful curvy shape in the center of our panel. I hated starting with motifs because it sounds kind of scary to some quilters, and I wish I would have said in the video, like, don't be intimidated by the word motif. We're just quilting these shapes and rotating around a set point. So hopefully you weren't like, oh, this is really difficult right off the bat, because that's not the point. But what we did is we used our arc rulers to quilt those arcs in all different directions. And I think I said this in the video, like, you're gonna get comfortable, or you're gonna have to practice in all different directions on your quilts. This is good. This is a good thing. It helps you get more comfortable with the rulers. But the thing is, when we're learning how to do something, our brain wants to default to the easy thing. So this kind of forces you out of your comfort zone and going in all those different directions. So hopefully there was not a lot of bad words said about me when you were practicing. First, we saw just how to do a basic motif, like not using the panel, just quilting those arcs out to different points. And then you can kind of see on the right just a variation. So depending on the curve ruler that you're using, the size of it, and how many points you're quilting it to, your motifs are going to look different, but they're all going to have that beautiful curvy look, and they're all going to draw your eye to the center of the quilt. So great way to show off some of your favorite parts. Now, when I was quilting this in the video, I was quilting arcs on that panel out to every point of that center, and that made a really detailed motif, which you can see right here. Now, I used contrasting thread because I really wanted you to see what I'm quilting. That's the whole point of it, right? And you can tell there's a lot of thread buildup in the center of that motif. So just know that when you're quilting this, using a thread color that blends really helps. And I think I did say that in the video, but it's funny how you can be a professional quilter, and I'm still quilting, and I'm like, oh, this looks kind of wobbly, but when you step back, you don't see the individual arcs so much, you just see the whole overall motif. So please keep going as you're quilting. But if you don't like that dense look, I showed how you can quilt to every other point in that star and have a motif that's a little less dense. So a lot of opportunities, a lot of options there. And throughout the whole video series, and really I say this in a lot of my videos, you can change up these designs and make them fit your preferences. I try to show a couple variations or, a couple examples, but please know that as you're practicing, you might just want to do 4 parts to your motif. You might want to just do half a motif. It doesn't matter. It's whatever makes you comfortable. Now, I know if you're watching, you're like, Angela, I don't know what I'm doing, so I don't know what makes me comfortable. But just know the more you practice, the more you'll figure that out. Now, I did say this in the video, but I want to reiterate it. Sometimes your rulers don't fit the space you're quilting them in. That's a point that I keep wanting to hammer home throughout this whole video series, because you could have all the rulers and still come up with a quilt that has a block that it doesn't quite fit. So knowing how to adjust your rulers to fit those spaces will make them so much more versatile for your quilts. So in this example, the motif doesn't fill that block perfectly. Well, I just used some echoing and some filler around it to make it do that. So you can always use that kind of echoing and that filler to really kind of make it fit, kind of tweak it to make it fit those shapes. So I think I said that, but I just want to reiterate that today. Another thing I was really kind of excited about in that video is showing you how to use your rulers in smaller blocks. One of the things I think that really helped me, get my ruler quilting to the next level was learning, how do I adjust this ruler for shapes that are too big or too small for the ruler? And it's something you can adapt to all kinds of rulers. So even though we're learning it with the curves, you can do that with other rulers as well. So when we're looking at the block that we're quilting, the idea is with my smiley ruler, it has a needle stop. You could quilt from one to the next, but what if you don't need that whole thing? How do you fit it into those smaller blocks? And this is something I showed in the video. And if you got the expanded resource PDF with the step-by-step instructions, you can see these diagrams I'm showing you here. The main idea is I just need to make sure that there's a 1/4 inch of space between the ruler and the corner of the block, because there's about a 1/4 inch between the needle and the edge of the foot. So you're kind of eyeballing it a little bit, but here we can see I've positioned the ruler so it's centered on the side of that block. I've pulled it away from the block just enough that I have that spacing, and that's going to allow me to quilt from one side of the block along that curve and give me that beautiful curve shape that fits the block, even though the ruler is too big for the block. So hopefully that made sense in the video. Hopefully it made sense here, but really just being aware of what that shape is or how to position that ruler will make all the difference with your quilting. So in the video, I showed you how we could quilt curves from one point to the next, adjusting the ruler as necessary. And the joke I like to make is you may have paid for the whole ruler, you just don't have to use the whole thing. So here we can kind of see using part of that curve. And one thing I did say in the video, but I also want to reiterate, depending on how curvy your shape is, how sharp that curve is, your look's going to be a little bit different. Your lines might overlap more than others, and that's totally fine. I don't really worry about that. I let the design kind of evolve however it evolves. I'm focused more on trying to get those lines as close to the corner as I can. And if they don't hit that corner perfectly, it's fine. Once you step back, it's going to give you that illusion. It's going to be close enough, but being able to kind of reposition your ruler helps you out with that. Now, one thing I don't know if I said in the video, but if you find that you're working through a quilt like this and you're quilting a lot of the same block and you're positioning it in the same spot all the time, you can use a washi tape or glow line tape to mark out where that line is on your ruler to create the reference line that you need for those blocks. And then you can just kind of remove it as you move on. So that can make it a little bit more efficient and easier to quilt. And then we saw some other curve designs. So just different curves you can connect. This is something you could definitely do without rulers, but of course in this example we're learning how to use our rulers in different shapes. Now one thing that's probably a little bit different with this challenge is normally I give you like quilting placement diagrams. Like you could put this design here because I know how quilters are. Half of the quilters like want me to tell them exactly what to do and where to put it, where to put the designs. But this challenge is really going to be up to you to pick the designs that you like. So I show you a lot of options. And I want you to experiment with them and try them out and find which one you like. I know it's a little scary, but I really believe you can do it. And then here we can kind of see some different arcs. So within those white kind of diamond shapes and those pink diamond shapes, quilting different arcs depending on how we place it. And again, moving in all those different directions. Now, something I did say in the video, but I just want to reiterate it, is if you're quilting on a sewing machine, you have the option to change the orientation of your quilt. That's one of the biggest upsides to quilting on a sewing machine. You can start in the center easily and you can rotate it to make it convenient for you. So definitely do that if that makes it more comfortable. Now on a long arm, you don't have that option. You're going to have to get you comfortable quilting in all different hand positions. And throughout the videos, when I show you the long arm quilting, you're going to see some different weird hand placements depending on the direction we're heading. And that's just part of the game of quilting on a long arm. Then we talked about geometric quilting. So we saw, smiley, and then we saw dot. So geometric quilting in some of those blocks. The idea here is that you could totally create those wedge shapes with a straight edge ruler. There's nothing wrong with that. In fact, if I were doing a few, I might use that. But I showed in the video how you can reposition the dot ruler to do the same thing with less rotating of the ruler. Now, it's funny because when I start getting into efficient quilting, sometimes I feel like, oh my gosh, I'm kind of neurotic about it. But sometimes the less amount of repositioning you have to do, the little bit easier it is. So we just kind of saw how you could do that. Now, if you're quilting along and you're like, I just want to use a straight edge ruler to do that, absolutely, you totally can. But here we can see how you can quilt along one side of dot and then just slide it under the foot and then go right up the other. So just something to make it just a little bit easier. So that really kind of was a lot to hit within one video. And I remember thinking when I put it all together, I'm like, oh, I hope they don't hate me for all this in one video. Then we saw week 2. So we're kind of moving out on that challenge panel and we worked on the next ring. So these shapes that we're filling in are a little bit differently shaped, right? They're kind of curvy. Some of them curve out, some curve in. But the designs that we're learning can apply to other shapes as well. I do know that you're probably not going to always make quilts with this shape block, but the things that we're learning, the things we're practicing are going to help you on all kinds of blocks. So hopefully that works for you. And just like the first video, we saw a lot of different options. I kind of get excited about the designs that I'm teaching. They're kind of like my kids. And I'm like, ooh, this would be cool and this would be cool. And so sometimes it's kind of hard to ring myself in. And we learned a lot of different designs in that video. And one thing I didn't say is I really don't want you to feel like you have to learn all the designs. Pick a couple and quilt them on your quilt. You can do the same thing in each block, or you can mix them up and make them all different. It's totally fine either way. So hopefully it was not overwhelming. Hopefully it's more kind of inspiring. So first we saw echoing. I mean, come on, if you guys have watched any of my videos, you know I love echoing. Echoing is your best quilting friend. And here we were using the arc rulers to quilt the echo shapes. Like we've talked about with other echoes, you can make them as dense as you like. You can spread them apart. You can put some filler in them. It's this point I start feeling like an infomercial. It's like, but wait, there's more. You can do all these cool things. But the idea is the sides of the block that you echo are the ones that are going to be highlighted. So when we have a bunch of blocks in a row, echoing the same side of all of them pulls out a secondary shape. So it's a really fun way to, create those secondary patterns on your quilts. If that's like way too much to think about, you're like, I'm just trying to learn how to hold my curved ruler and breathe at the same time, that's totally fine. But it's a fun way to do that. Now in this example, I'm not quilting along the whole ruler again, right? I'm just quilting along part of it, starting at the bottom of the block and stopping just underneath the top point. So positioning where I need it to be, quilting it to that point, and then rotating. So again, using it in a lot of different directions, even within the same block. To make it more efficient, I'm traveling in between those echo lines, and I really like how it just creates that beautiful curvy shape. And I don't think I said this in the video, but if your curve, I'm going to go back, if your curve doesn't perfectly match the curve of the block, it's fine. For instance, maybe Smiley is a little curvier than the block. It doesn't have to be the exact same. It's going to be close enough, and that's going to make it look fine. I would focus more on having that line smooth than having it perfectly shaped. So I'm just quilting up to that top and then rotating to the other side. Now, you all know I love quilting things to death. Quilt it till it's dead and put more on it has always been my motto. You don't have to do that. Just because I like to add all the quilting doesn't mean you have to. But if you really want to make those echo lines pop out, adding that filler in the unquilted area is really going to help them stand out. So you can decide if you want to do that or not. I love the way it looks. And I also love breaking up the ruler quilting. Like, I don't like to do just ruler quilting over the whole quilt or just swirls. I like to alternate between the two. But I've said it a million times, you can adjust that and do whatever you find more convenient. And like I said, what side of the block you echo is the side that will show off. So in the lighter blue blocks, I'm echoing the outer curve. But you can see on those darker blue, a couple different options. One of those, I echo just the top. The other darker blue, I echoed the bottom. So you can create some different effects just by what you choose to echo. And some other examples here. So echoing different sides, adding multiple lines. I could have made them closer together. It really just depends on how much time you have and what you're going for. Another example there. So really for the, I don't want to say it's like a basic shape, but echoing is not a complex type design. It really does have a cool effect on your quilts. Then I was trying to think of other ways when I was putting together the video, other ways you can use arcs. And so all these designs are just using that same arc in a slightly different way. So one of them was using like rays or quilting rays that radiate from different points on the block. And I love how this looks. By quilting it out and traveling, it's kind of like those echoes, except they overlap and they create kind of that cool looking effect. And so depending on the points that you quilt those lines that they radiate from, and depending on how many you add, will just determine how complex it looks. You might find this a little bit easier because the more overlapping you have, the less any one individual line will show up. So if you're quilting and you're like, oh, it's not looking great, just add some more lines until you like how it looks. And a couple different examples here. So I had fun kind of picking different points to quilt those rays from and then adding the filler in the rest. Of course, you can leave the filler out. But I mocked this up real quick. I liked how it showed the secondary pattern that it can make within that panel. So when I'm doing the challenge panel, I put a lot of different designs on it because that's my sampler for the quilt. But if I were actually quilting a quilt like this, I wouldn't do so many different designs. Well, I might, but maybe not in such a hodgepodge kind of way. But when you take one design and you use it in repeated blocks, sometimes it makes a really cool secondary design. And so I love when that happens because it doesn't take any more effort, but it looks really cool. Another thing I didn't point out is if you're working with bigger arc rulers, you can combine the shapes. So in this video, I did just the light blue and the darker blue, two different designs. But in this example, I quilted arcs that join those pieces together and then overlap. And so it makes kind of a cool effect. But that wasn't in the tutorial, but you can try it if you want something a little different. And then we saw opposite arcs. So I couldn't think of what to name this. I wanted to call it like two arcs or curving away, whatever. So the idea that you can change up the direction of your arcs for a different look. A lot of the quilting that I do is nothing groundbreaking. It's just using the same shape in a bunch of different ways. And in this example, I'm quilting my arcs so that they extend from the bottom of the block, but they change direction to give it a slightly different look. But what I love about this design is that it starts and ends at the same point. So depending on how I'm working my way through the quilt, maybe that's what I want, a design that comes back so I can move on in some way or another. And here you can kind of see that example. Great practice on working with both sides of that ruler, a little bit of echoing, a little bit of curve, just a tiny bit of a different look. And again, just depending on your preferences and how you want to work through it. Now, like we saw with the echo lines, if you want to show off and add even more detail, you can fill in the unquilted area in the center. Now, in this example, I did a lot of that because I like how it looks, but this is something I would probably do with bigger blocks, right? Maybe I use some echoing to create that shape and then in that bigger unquilted area. So probably wouldn't do it in a lot of smaller blocks, but I did it in this video series because, I like to quilt things to death. And then lastly, we solved the dot motif. So using the dot ruler, we created this shape. And the main takeaway for this point is that I'm using different portions of the ruler to create the shape. And I don't think I really hit that home in the video. When you're working with your rulers, especially when they have, different shapes that come together to make one main shape, try playing around with different portions of it and see what you can come up with. In this example, we use the cutout of the dot to create the center part, and then we just use the bottom curve to create those little petals off to the side. Now, I could have totally used the dot ruler for the center and then just use my smiley arc ruler for the side. That would have worked as well. But my teachable moment here was using dots, so that's how we did it. So using just part of it in some areas. So really, as you're working with the rulers that you have and you're not sure what to use them for, try combining different portions of it. Try rotating it in different directions. You might be surprised at what cool designs you can come up with. In this example, I just thought that little dot motif kind of perfectly filled the block and just looked so lovely. And then of course you could add some filler around it if you really want to make it pop out. Really for the videos, putting that filler around it makes the picture design really pop out in the picture, but it does look really cool too. And then there was a couple designs that, I didn't really necessarily go into detail in the video because I had to cut it off somewhere. But we're going to talk about next week using these echo lines that touch corners, but you can see a little bit of a different example there. And we also talked about just quilting a single petal that extends from the bottom, just using your arc ruler to quilt that petal and putting filler around it. So same shape, just a lot of different options and a lot of different ways to use them on your block. And again, I cannot say this enough. As you're working through the video, don't feel like you have to learn every design. That's not the point here. I want you to practice with your rulers. That's the main point. Pick one or two that you like and practice them, knowing that at any time you can come back and try the other ones or not. It's totally up to you. Now, next week's video, which will be out on Tuesday, we're going to see the same kind of idea of quilting those arcs, but we're going to learn about how to do it in a more efficient manner. Not that I think quilting needs to be efficient, right? That's not the main idea, but how do I approach a quilt so that I'm able to pick designs that go from block to block to block while also combining rulers in there. So this one's going to be a little bit more of like, how would I approach a quilt? So kind of keep that in mind as we get to it. Now, as always, if you've participated in any of my recent free motion challenge quilting alongs, I have free downloadable quilting diagrams. So be sure to click the link in the description box. It'll take you to all that. You can download those. And then if you need more step-by-step instructions, like this expanded resource PDF has more pictures, more instructions, step by step, just a little bit more detail in it. And it's like 40 pages. I was like, oh my gosh, this thing is so big, but I just want all the information in there. So you can find the information for that, of course, by clicking the link in the description box. And then next week we'll do the efficient quilting, and then the week after we're going to talk about quilting negative space or background areas with rulers. So kind of hitting all the things. I'm super, super excited about it. So if you haven't watched the previous videos, be sure to check that out. And also, there's a couple videos even before the series started where I show you the basics of quilting with rulers on your sewing machine and your long arm. So if you're like, I don't even know how to hold the ruler, be sure to check that out, because learning how to do the designs is not going to make any sense if you're not sure how to even hold the rulers to do it. So definitely looking forward to that. Well, that was a lot of talking. Hopefully we have some questions, perhaps a couple. I will say ruler quilting is one of the things that feels a little weird at first. So if you are quilting along and you're newer to it, just take your time. Like, I've taught enough classes in person that it just feels weird at first. But if you can force yourself to kind of embrace that weirdness and work through it, I promise it becomes more and more comfortable the more you practice with it. Do we ship internationally? We do. And if you live someplace warm, I might just deliver it to you personally. It's too cold here. No, I'm just kidding. Yes, we do. The shipping fees are a little bit more expensive, of course, because shipping is just expensive, but we do. So you can definitely do that. I can get my arcs, but my fillers need some work. How long does that take? Well, it doesn't take as long as you might think. It takes a little bit of practice. One thing I should say is when you're filling in tiny areas like that, it's more difficult than doing it bigger. So if you're working on, let's say, your swirls, instead of practicing for the first time within your arcs in an area this big, give yourself a little bit of a bigger space to practice in, just because you're not running into a boundary so often. But I promise it just takes a little bit of practice. The thing to remember when doing your fillers is just to be consistent, even if it's consistently inconsistent. So use your echoing to move around, and I promise it gets easier. I have a whole video series on free motion fillers with like tons of different videos. So pick one of those out, practice it, and I promise every time you practice it gets better and it gets easier. Can I address how to use the black curved lines on Smiley? Yeah, I'll try to work that into next week's live chat. Those black curved lines are reference lines to line up with your previously quilted arc. So the short story is, if you're using the big side of Smiley, you quilt along one side and you flip it to the other, it gives you reference lines to put on that first curve to make sure that it's centered. So it's just helping you keep it centered. Same on the smaller side. And I do think maybe in the next video I point that out, but I'll make sure I kind of go into more detail that next week's live chat. And do I have filler videos? Yes, I do. So you can check out that free motion fillers challenge video series. It's like the videos are based on shape. So there's like swirls, circles, wavy lines. I'm going to forget geometric arcs. There's a bunch of different fillers. So, but one thing I kind of notice as I'm teaching classes, especially in person, and we're looking through my quilts, I don't feel like I need to know 50 different designs. Like if you look at the quilting I'm doing, there's like maybe 8 to 10 designs I do a lot. And so you don't have to know a bunch of different fillers. Pick a couple, practice them, and you'll be able to do them on your quilts, and they'll look amazing, I promise. So great questions. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope wherever you are that you're staying warm, because it's just a cold time of year. Perfect quilting weather, right? But I do appreciate you taking your time to hang out with me. I will be back next week for next week's live chat where we will recap the upcoming video. So until then, everybody stay safe and happy quilting.